So welcome everyone to New York and Global Large Scale Scrum Meetup. Today we have a very special guest who has been with us more than once, more than twice, multiple times. The well-respected Bjarte Bogsnes, who is the expert and many years of research practitioner in finance and HR. His line of work has been spanning across those two very important disciplines. He has more than 20 years of experience in working in leadership. His home country is Norway. He is the author of the Implemented Beyond Budgeting, and this is the book that I strongly recommend to read for anyone who's involved in budgeting, finance, sales, marketing, product development. This is the book to read. I think there were 2 editions. The second edition just came out recently. This is like a table book. It's like a Bible, the holy book for anyone who's involved in budgeting, finance, and product-centric development. So again, George spoke recently at the Large Scale Scrum Global Conference in Berlin. Very igniting, very energizing talk, and very revealing. This is a replay and a deeper dive into some of the dimensions for those folks that were not able to attend. So you should consider this as a great opportunity to hear it live. Without any further ado, I'm going to pass it on to you, Bjarte. Please take it away. And for everyone, I strongly request and kindly ask to turn your cameras on and mics off. It's really going to help the speaker. Off to you, Bjarte.
Thank you, Gene, and thank you for the invitation. It's great to be back. I would assume that some of you might have heard me before and some of you not, which is a challenge when you are presenting, because should you kind of take this from the basic and the start, or should you go a bit further? I will try to do both. So some of you will have heard some of what I will share, but I've also got some new stuff for you at the end. I'm going to talk about the viable map, which is you've heard about the business model canvas. This is the management model canvas built around Beyond Budgeting. A workbook just out, and I'll come back to it. By the way, if you wonder a little bit about the rustic background, I'm now in my mountain cabin in Norway, and I'm going to go skiing tomorrow. So, but now I'm with you. All right. The author Douglas Adams, he once said that I might not have gone where I intended to go, but I think I ended up where I needed to be. And those words resonate with me for at least 2 reasons. First, I mean, it was in no way given that I should be here with you today and talk about Beyond Budgeting, because my career started in a very different place. After I graduated from business studies, I joined one of Scandinavia's largest companies. It used to be called Statoil. Today it's called Equinor. And my first management job in that company the year after was as head of the corporate budget department. So I think I know what I'm talking about. I've been heading up more budget processes in my life than I want to be reminded about. And I later got a chance to head up the implementation of this budget, of Beyond Budgeting in this company many years later. The other reason these words resonate with me is that I come from a teacher family. So my mother, my father, all teachers, great teachers, I would say. I was the black sheep of the family because I went for business studies. But given what I've been doing now for actually almost 30 years, I actually feel I'm back in the fold. And I also married a teacher, by the way. Anyway, Beyond Budgeting. Every time I discuss this with executives, finance people, managers, others, there is one word that keeps coming up over and over again, and that word is control. And the context is, of course, the fear of losing control. And when I hear this, I often ask people, okay, but what do you mean with control? Can you please help me explain? And the interesting thing is that after people have said cost control, many actually go quiet. They struggle with putting words on what they are so afraid of losing. So I checked up in Oxford Dictionary, how would they define control? And they call it the power to influence or direct people's behavior or the course of events. And what does this mean in organizational terms, in business terms? Well, it basically means two things: controlling people and controlling the future. And behind these two lies the two main assumptions behind traditional management. Number one, you can't trust people. Number two, the future is predictable and plannable. And you know, and I know that this is not true. These are more illusions of control. Of course, people can be managed, but if people are managed in stupid ways, well, they hopefully find a way around in order to get their job done. And when it comes to the future, the only thing we know is that we don't know. Talking about trust and trusting people, I've always traveled a lot, and I still do. And the first thing I always check when I enter the hotel room at night is what kind of clothing hangers do they have? Is it the one at the top with a hook, or is it that stupid one at the bottom, which is a hassle to use? And I hope we can all agree that I just hate it. So how come some hotels offer us these stupid hangers? I think we all know why. This is about a few stolen hangers with a hook. And what was the response? To punish everybody because someone did something wrong. Actually, one of the problems with traditional management. Wise people out there have very much agreed with what I just have said, talking about people. Good old Peter Drucker, most of what we call management is about making it difficult for people to do their job. And this also resonates with me because sometimes the problem is that we manage too much, or not just sometimes, actually very often. When it comes to predicting the future, planning, corporate planning, another wise person, Russell Acuff, he compared a lot of the planning he was observing in especially large organizations. He compared it with a ritual rain dance. It has no effect on the weather, but those who engage in it think it does. And again, this also resonates with me because I've done a lot of dancing in my life through all the budget processes I've been heading up. And the dancing was probably okay, but I don't think the impact on the performance of the organization was very positive to the extent it had any impact. I actually think it was negative, as I will come back to. Okay, so much for wise people. Imagine an organization that 100 years ago invented a fantastic machine. It was state of the art and key for the success of this organization. And 50 years ago, this machine started to make some trouble, didn't work that well. And today, this machine is completely broken, kaput. It looked like this. This is not a true story, because in real life, people would hopefully have done something 50 years ago, either try to fix this machine, or even better, try to invent a new, different, better machine. Because innovation is something we all love, right? Innovation, we all want to be leading edge, unique, right on the forefront, better than everybody else. But that enthusiasm for innovation seems to be limited to technology innovation, into product services and so on. But there is also something called management innovation that we shall talk about today, exploring, embracing new ways of leading and managing. And management innovation, is that great? Oh no, that is scary. Kicking out the budget, are you crazy? And the consequence of this is that it's very crowded on the left-hand side. Everybody is into that kind of innovation in some form or shape. Management innovation, on the other hand, is not yet the crowded place because it feels scary. But this is actually good news for brave companies who dare to explore and embrace also this kind of innovation, because you can get just as much performance, competitive advantage out of management innovation as you can get from technology innovation. There are companies out there who openly state that we have no advantage whatsoever in what we produce, sell, provide. We find it in the way we lead and manage. And again, I've got some examples for you a little bit later. So performance is why we should go beyond budgeting, because it is good for performance. And actually, these days, we actually think we can prove it. And but performance defined in the right way, as I will come back to. So it is about performance, but it is also about budgets and solving budget problems. So before we move on, I'd like to share with you my budget problem list, which is actually quite a long one. And as I go through these problems, I'd like you to think about, reflect, are there any of these problems that you haven't experienced or observed in your own working life? Budgeting, and by the way, when I say budgets here, think about this as more than cost budgets, more than project budgets. This is the broader finance definition. We are also talking profit and loss budgets. We are talking cash flow budgets, balance sheet budgets, and so on. So it's the kind of, again, the broader definition. But it is a very time-consuming process, making budgets, following up budgets. Some time ago, I did a session with a French car producer in Paris. And do you know when their budget process started? In March. Do you know when it was finished? In March, the year after. So maybe that's why we call it the annual budget. Anyway, they realized they had a problem. Assumptions quickly outdated. I mean, how on earth do we know what will happen next year? For those who have completed the 2024 budget, well, I mean, these companies know something about the future, which I don't. This is a serious problem. Budgeting can stimulate what I would call unethical behaviors. The lowballing, the gaming, the sandbagging, the resource hoarding, the frenzied December spending. This is not the kind of behaviors we would like to see between colleagues. At the same time, I am not blaming anyone for behaving like this, because these people are just responding to the system we have designed for them to operate in. So as you all probably know, if we want to change behaviors, it is not about fixing people, it's about fixing systems, which again changes behaviors. And that is what Beyond Budgeting does. It fixes systems. Budgets can create these illusions of control that we briefly talked about. Of course, it might feel very comfortable to have next year described with 1 million details and decibels. But again, the only thing we know is that we don't know, and it will be wrong. So if we don't have control, whatever that word means, maybe it's better to accept it, acknowledge it, and act accordingly, than to think that we have control, to fool ourselves and act accordingly. Budgets force us to make decisions too early. We have to decide in the autumn, the year before, what we shall do next year and what it shall cost. And especially in larger organizations, often too many of these decisions are taken too high up. That does not, as you know, always improve the quality of decisions. Very often it's the other way around. Budgets can prevent us from doing stuff that we should have done, but we can't because it's not in the budget. But maybe this sometimes also can work the other way around. Could it sometimes lead us to do things that we shouldn't have done? But it is in the budget and it is spend it or lose it. You know the game. And linked to this, I fully accept that the cost budget can be a very effective ceiling for cost, but that ceiling is just as effective as a floor, in the sense that these budgets tend to be spent for the reasons that we just discussed. And to define good performance as hitting your cost budget, is that really good performance? What if you did that, but you should have spent more, or you could have spent less? Or what if you hit your profit and loss budget, if you have a P&L responsibility, and you could have done even better, as 2 examples. Now, again, I don't see all your faces, but my question is still, are there any of these problems that you haven't experienced in your own working career? And I wouldn't be surprised if there is a lot of that. I mean, not too many hands are up now. My experience is that a lot of people recognize these problems. I've been sharing this list of problems with hundreds of thousands of people around the world in the almost 30 years I've been working with this. And most people out there agree, executives, managers, finance people, and many others. At the same time, most of these organizations continue doing stuff they admit isn't very smart, which is quite interesting. And I have a theory about why. But before I share that one with you, I have one more problem on this list, which too many do not have on their list. And I've called it conflicting purposes. And it has to do with the fact that the budget is used for different things: target setting, forecasting, resource allocation, stuff that can't be done in one process and one set of numbers. So you need to separate these purposes. I'll come back to that if I got time for it. And this is an interesting problem because it is, as I indicated, it is a problem, but it also represents solutions here. But again, how come so many companies continue doing what they do admit is stupid? And one reason might be that, well, we recognize these symptoms, but these are regarded more as irritating itches and not symptoms of a bigger, deeper, and more systemic problem. But that is exactly what these problems are: symptoms of a significant problem, which is also a paradox. First of all, here we are looking at quite old management technology. In case you don't know, budgeting is actually roughly 100-year-old as a management technology. And the inventor, well, you have heard his name. That was Mr. James O. McKinsey, the founder of McKinsey Consulting. I never met Mr. McKinsey, but actually, I don't think he had any kind of evil intentions. I don't think he was an evil man. I actually think he had the best of intentions. He wanted to help organizations perform better. This was actually management innovation 100 years ago. And it probably worked 100 years ago, maybe even 50 years ago. But today, this way of thinking, this way of leading, this way of managing is doing exactly the opposite. It has become more of a barrier than a support for organizations in achieving their full potential. And that I would call a pretty big problem. And again, the reason why, because things have changed. Things have changed when it comes to the world around us, our business environments, with all the VUCA, the volatility, the uncertainty, the complexity, and the ambiguity out there. If we take that VUCA level seriously, it must have implications for how we design our management models, compared to if there was little or no VUCA out there. And trust me, budgeting was designed in an almost VUCA-free world. So that is one reality we need to reflect on. What does the world around us look like? The other reality we need to reflect on is not external, it's internal. It has to do with people, employees, asking ourselves, what kind of employees do we generally believe that we have in the organization? And I'm sure that most of you are familiar with theory X and theory Y, Douglas McGregor and his concept and his book from 1960, The Human Side of Enterprise. And as you know, these are two opposing views on people and what motivates people. Well, theory X is a pretty negative view of people, a view that most employees is a bunch of potential thieves and crooks. And unless we manage them tightly, they will all run away, do a lot of stupid things, and spend money like drunken sailors. Well, if you read the book, you won't find those words. Those are my words. But I think that is what McGregor meant. He was a bit more polite and academic. Then you have his theory Y, a much more positive view on people, a view that most people actually want to perform, want to do a good job, want to be involved, want to be listened to, want to be treated as adults. And we don't need to agree so far on where our sympathy are, even if I do have a certain hope, and I do believe we share a theory Y view. But it should be very easy to agree that if we mainly believe in theory Y, our management model should look very different compared to if we mainly believe in theory X. And if we combine the two dimensions, it could look like this, and you find traditional management in that lower left-hand corner with a conscious or unconscious assumption that the world is still a predictable and plannable and stable place, and that most people is on the X side. If we disagree with this, then this is not the place to be. Then we need to move up in that upper right-hand corner by addressing both leadership horizontally and our management processes vertically. And what we need to get out of traditional management, I have used the following words to describe. And I recall when I wrote these words, I said to myself, Bjarte, don't be too hard on traditional management. But again, I don't think I overdid it, because I've been sharing again these words with so many managers all over the world. And it is a bit scary how many looks I get when these words are coming up, which I only can interpret in one way. So what? Isn't this the way it has to be? Well, again, maybe there was a time when this was the right thing to do, but those days are behind us. So what do we need to do? On a very high level, headline level, on the leadership side, more purpose-based, more values-based, less rules-based. We are not saying no rules, we are saying less rules, more purpose and values, more autonomy, more transparency. And transparency here is an important word, because it is in this context very good news for scared managers and others afraid of losing control, because transparency can be a very effective control mechanism, a social control mechanism. And you might have heard about this fascinating example from the Swiss pharmaceutical company Roche, who today are on a beyond budgeting journey, by the way. They did a very interesting experiment some years ago around travel cost. And in the pilot, they kicked out the travel budget, kicked out travel rules and regulations, and they replaced it with full transparency. So with a few exceptions, everybody could see everything. If you traveled, to where did you fly, eat, sleep, cheap or expensive, open for your colleagues to see, and vice versa. And guess what happened with travel cost in this pilot? Came down through a very simple self-regulating control mechanism. This was about tearing out pages in that rules book instead of doing the opposite. But there is a but here. Transparency is a very powerful mechanism. It has to be applied with wisdom. And if it becomes naming and shaming, then of course it doesn't work. So that is why we should always position transparency more from a learning perspective than from a control perspective. How can we learn from each other if everything is secret? And last but not least, internal intrinsic motivation as opposed to external extrinsic motivation. And as you know, the most common way of motivating people extrinsically in business today is individual bonus. And I can think of no area where there's a bigger gap between what most research is telling us about motivation in knowledge organizations for knowledge workers and what most businesses are practicing. It's simply amazing. And I'm sure you know what this research is telling us. So I won't go into it, but I'm simply amazed. So our recommendation, as I will come back to in Beyond Budgeting, is not individual bonus, but common bonus schemes. For instance, driven by how we are doing versus competition. Anyway, a number of organizations, they have the very best intentions when it comes to people and leadership. If you look at what they write, what they say, then it's great. But it doesn't help to have these theory Y leadership intentions if you have theory X management processes, which is the case in so many organizations, because that creates these poisonous gaps between what is said and what is done. So if we are serious about these words, we have to make sure that they are reflected in our management processes, which typically means changing our management processes, not just to reflect these words, but also to make our management processes more VUCA robust. And here are some headlines of what that could mean. First of all, the traditional detailed annual budget, it has to go, because it represents so much of that traditional thinking in that lower left-hand corner. More specifically, when we shall set targets, to the extent we shall do that, that's another discussion that we don't have time for today. But no targets is also a very interesting discussion. But if we do it, could we learn a bit from football or soccer, as most of you guys would say? I mean, I have yet to meet a soccer team, a football team, saying that the ambition for next season is to score 45 goals and get 49 points. Those are budget goals, and they don't think like that. They think in terms of comparing themselves to others and doing better than others and hopefully better than everybody else. And that relative thinking can, in some cases, also be quite effective in business. And we have some great examples. When it comes to the rhythm, the cadence of all of this, why on earth shall everything circulate around the fiscal year of typically January to December? From a pure business point of view, that cadence is very often a completely artificial construct. So we need to organize these processes where it's possible, where it makes sense, on a rhythm which is more business-driven, more event-driven, and less calendar-driven. And last but not least, when we shall evaluate what good performance look like, we cannot reduce that to comparing two numbers and then conclude. We need a richer, broader, more intelligent performance language. And this, my friends, is what Beyond Budgeting is about, addressing both leadership and management processes in order to become more adaptive and more human. And you might say that, well, this is about business agility. Yes, it is. But I'm on purpose not using that business agility word because, I'm a big fan of all everything behind it. But some of our labels will not be that much alive today, or in 10 years' time, or 15 years' time, 20 years' time, as they are today. But we will always talk about more adaptive and more human organizations. That is why I chose these words. So this is the high-level introduction to Beyond Budgeting. This is the model itself. 12 principles on leadership and on management processes. I will not go through anything in detail here, but I still want to make a few reflections around these principles and this model. And I want to start with that tagline. Again, performance the right way. Beyond Budgeting changes how we define performance, how we deliver performance, how we evaluate performance, and how we reward performance the right way. And then again, we are addressing both leadership and management processes. And if you look at what we say on leadership, purpose, values, transparency, autonomy, and other things, it is not that unique. Agile would say something similar, lean, many other communities would say something similar. But very often, these models, these communities, especially the kind of the more leadership-oriented ones, have not reflected very much on what kind of management processes are needed to activate these good leadership intentions. And that has a strong focus in Beyond Budgeting, not just talking about leadership, but also about management processes, what we actually do. Because what we do speaks 10 times louder than what we say. And the coherence between the two is therefore extremely important. So coherence is another important word in Beyond Budgeting, coherence between what we say and what we do. And a classical example of the opposite that we find in so many organizations, it doesn't help to talk loud and warm on the leadership side, principle 4 here, autonomy, about how fantastic employees we have on board. And we would be nothing without you. And we trust you so much, the executives are saying. But of course we need detailed travel budgets. Are you crazy? I mean, this is hypocrisy, right? One message on the left-hand side, another message on the right-hand side, and guess what people are hearing? It is the hypocrisy, and again, the true message lies in what is done through the management processes. So again, coherence is key. These principles are principles. This is not the management recipe, right? What this should mean in your organization depends on your organization, and that is how it should be. That doesn't mean that we don't have practical advice. We have loads of them coming from organizations on the journey who have been very innovative in finding great ways of kind of making these principles come alive in their own organizations. And they are sharing this through the Beyond Budgeting Roundtable, which I will come together back to. Two classical misunderstandings around Beyond Budgeting. They are both linked to principle 9, resource allocation, cost management without budgets. Misunderstanding number 1, beyond budgeting is just another way of managing cost. Well, it is, but there are 11 other principles. This is quite a complete, coherent leadership management model. Second misunderstanding, beyond budgeting, no budget, that must mean I can spend whatever I want and cost is not important. Sorry guys, that is not what we are saying. Cost is still important, money is still important, and money will often be a constraint. And because of this, we need more intelligent and effective ways of managing cost than what Mr. McKinsey could offer us 100 years ago. So this is the model, the principles. You might find a number of similarities with the Agile Manifesto, which was formulated then 3 years later, because these principles were formulated back in and launched back in 1998. Many similarities, but also some differences. And the main difference is that Agile was not designed as a way to run an organization, an enterprise, while beyond budgeting was. So if you're trying to scale Agile, the holes in Agile become visible. Agile is not saying very much about all the stuff you find here on the right-hand side. But trust me, any CEO, any CFO, if you talk about scaling Agile, would ask you, well, how will this be solved in this new and wonderful world? And Agile doesn't have the answer, beyond budgeting does. That is why the combination of these two is a beautiful fit. And that is why we need to work even more together. A number of companies are today... Can you please mute? A number of companies are on this journey in some form or shape, and here is an overview of some of them. And I could have talked for hours and hours about amazing management innovation. We don't have the time. So if you've heard me before, you will have heard me talking about a company called Miles, Norwegian company up in the upper right-hand corner. No budgets, IT company, no budgets, no targets, fantastic performance. I will not talk about Miles today. You will heard me talk about a bank, a Swedish bank called Handelsbanken, quite big in Northern Europe, 700 branches, quite big in the UK. No budgets, no targets, no individual bonus. This was the guy that got it all started back in 1970. And this bank has been performing better than the average of its competitors every single year since 1972. An amazing case. But again, I won't talk more about that. I want to talk about another company here that most of you haven't heard about. If you look below Handelsbanken and Roche, David Lloyd Clubs. It's a UK fitness club company, around 300 fitness clubs, mainly in the UK, but also some in continental Europe. I met with this company back in October 2019, and by January 1, they were up and running. And what happened in 2020? The pandemic. How do you think that hits a company in the fitness business? Potential disaster. This company not just survived, they are today doing better than ever. They have adopted almost all aspects of the beyond budgeting model. Like, for instance, thinking football, soccer, they benchmark, compare their fitness clubs on a lot of stuff, most of it non-financial, but also financial. Very few targets, but nobody likes to be laggards. And this also drives learning, stimulating these guys to reach out to the better performing clubs. What are you guys doing that we are not doing? They have also done something with the rhythm, the pace of their management model. At which point in time do most people sign up for a fitness club? Well, that is on January 2nd, when these clubs open again. That means that you can't have an investment approval process where these investments are approved late December, early January, right? So that has to happen earlier. So this company has structured their process and cadence around 4-month cycles, and one of these cycles that is finished well before end of the year deals with investments. And by the way, none of these cycles ends in end of December. End of December actually falls in the middle of one of these cycles. In other cycles, they address other important things for the corporate and for these clubs. David Lloyd is owned by a UK private equity company called TDR Capital. Most private equity companies, they buy companies / cost and sell off. TDR is difficult. They look for what they call undermanaged companies, and they buy these companies, help them improve their leadership management, and then sell off. They came across Beyond Budgeting, got very fascinated, and they want this out in all 30 companies in the portfolio, not by force, but strongly encouraging them. And we did manage 3 or 4 companies before the pandemic. A bit further down, you see a company called Stonegate Group as one example. It's the largest pub chain company in the UK. You won't find their name on any pubs, but they own a lot of pub chains in the UK, as one example. Again, doing a lot of benchmarking between pubs like David Lloyd is doing. All right, that was a little taste on one example of what this could mean in practice. I mean, there are many different ways of doing this, but they all have a common inspiration, the Beyond Budgeting model. Let me then finish with the viable map. Our version of, so it's a management model canvas, not a business model canvas, but the management model canvas. It's a workbook that is just out. This is actually the front page. And there are different ways of getting hold of this book, for instance, on Amazon, and also this web address that you can see here. So what is the viable map? Well, it starts with, again, with the Beyond Budgeting principles, the model, which we then stack like this. That's the first step. Then we do what we did in the beginning here. We think about the external environment. What are we looking at? Is it a stable, predictable place, or is it volatile, or anything in between? And the more stable your business environment is, the more fixed and less flexible your management processes needs to be, and vice versa. Then we need to make the same assessment on people. So where do we think most of them are? Is it kind of the X type or Y type? And again, if we think that most employees or believe that most employees is on the X side, we don't need much self-regulation, and we need quite a centralized management model with quite a lot of command and control. But if we believe that most employees lies on the other scale or towards that, then we need much more self-regulation and a more distributed management model. And then we have a discussion in the management team. So where is the external world? What's our view on people? And having done that, we can start the mapping of our own organization. So where do we together believe that we are? And this can be done at different levels in the organization, different management teams, to see are there different views on this. And if there are different views within a management team, you can also use more than one sticker on each principle, then colored with different colors to see where are the differences, and let that be the basis for the discussion. And the main point is not exactly where that sticker ends up. It is the discussion that is important. And this viable map that we've called it helps you to do 4 things. First of all, it helps you to kind of have a common understanding of what is a management model. Discuss that, because it is a bit fuzzy. It's people have typically a better understanding of what the business model is and what the management model is. This helps that discussion. Then you can describe your management model like this team just have done. Then you can diagnose, are there any issues? Are there any outliers? And we have got 2 ones on the left-hand side that might be an issue here, and maybe there's some more stuff. And then we can design a better way based on what we have seen. And I will give some advice now on what information should we use to design a better way. So this is what the map looks like again. And again, your stickers is your description of your management model. And if all of your stickers end up on the left-hand side in that red column to the left, then this is what we call budgeting in a broad sense, not just in financial terms, but the centralized command and control. But again, if your business environment is on the left-hand side, and by the way, if you look in the upper left-hand corner, then we have defined the opposite of VUCA, which is stable, understood, simple, and orderly. That's the opposite of VUCA. So if your business environment is on the SUSO side, and if most of your employees are on the X side, it's not that dangerous to be on the left-hand side. It makes maybe sense. But then we say that anything to the right of that red column, anything within the green area here, that is what we call beyond budgeting. So beyond budgeting is not about saying that everything has to be completely over on the right-hand side, because that depends, again, on your business environment, on your view on people, or the state of when it comes to people. So what is more important is coherence, right? So wherever you are, what's the, in that green area, what is the coherence here? And here you can see that there seems to be some issues with lack of coherence because there are some outliers. And that is something that needs to be addressed and can be done in a design phase. So that is the viable map, no rocket science, but we have very high expectations that this is something that can help organizations in implementing beyond budgeting by going through this session, not just in the executive team, but also in other teams and functions. And the broader this is done, the better actually. So that's what I wanted to share with you. Jean, you mentioned my book. That was actually the previous book, which came in 2 editions, and the last one came out some years ago. And this book has more of everything. More cases, what we did in a company called Borealis, before there was anything called Beyond Budgeting. We are talking 1995. More about the Statoil case. There's a chapter about Beyond Budgeting in Agile, because there are so many interfaces, and also more about implementation, which I didn't have time to talk about. But this book is, when it comes to size, a traditional book. It's not traditional from a content point of view, but from a size point of view, it is. So around 250 pages, which is too long and too much for a number of busy executives with limited time to read. So that is why my latest book, which is just out, is on purpose a shorter one, aimed at busy executives with limited time to read. And that is why this book is also out in audio book, because some of these guys don't even have time to read, but some of them do some driving. And again, you can see I don't use the label business agility on purpose. I talk about adaptive and human. And I'm very proud that Gary Hamel wrote the foreword. It's a great foreword. And on the back cover, endorsements from Rita McGrath at Columbia Business School, from Dave Snowden, from Julian Birkinshaw at London Business School, and also from Jos de Blok from the Dutch health organization Buurtzorg. So that was the marketing for today. These are my contact details. If you want to get in touch with me, if anybody wants to follow me on Twitter, then or LinkedIn, the only thing I write about is this stuff. I promise no cats, no dogs, no grandchildren, only Beyond Budgeting. And if you want to check out the Beyond Budgeting Roundtable, that is an international network of organizations interested in Beyond Budgeting, not just organizations, but also individuals. We have been running for 25 years, since 1998. We meet typically twice a year. Our last meeting was in London, where the pharmaceutical company Merck had a great presentation of their Beyond Budgeting story, and also some other great cases. And then, last but not least, well, at last, my tiny little website, Bogsnes Advisory. So with those words, I'm going to stop sharing. I look forward to your questions and comments. And I'm sorry about the rush, but I was trying to cover a big topic in 45 minutes, and I want time to at least some discussion here. And I'm flexible on time if somebody wants to stay on and ask me more after we pass the deadline here.
Thank you very much.
Could you facilitate this one?
Yeah, Bjarte, thank you very much. It's been great as always, and even deeper than before on some topics. Folks, we got like literally 10 minutes, unless, I know people will start dropping after that. Fire at will, shoot from the hip, as we say. Ask questions. Going we have to Jeremy, go.
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep, yes, I can.
Yeah, so thank you very much for that. I'll give you a little bit of context about who I am, to make sense of the question. So like many people here, my background is lean and agile. I've been in the space for about 20 years on my learning journey. Personally, I've been in the space of organizational change for about a decade. And one of the areas that I've always struggled to making impact or headway is in finance departments. And I'm the first to admit, one of the big challenges I have is because I don't speak the right language. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a finance director. I am, by training, a technologist, and by experience, a kind of lean agilist. So other than reading your book, which is now on my bio list, your second book,
Thank you.
Two questions that are very closely related. How can I, as a non-finance person, best educate myself so I can speak the right language, understand the right concepts, so that when I come knocking on the door of the FD, so the finance director or whomever else, it's less alien to me, and vice versa? How can I best educate those in finance that all the concepts, the principles that are very familiar to me in terms of beyond budgeting from lean and agile and other areas of change, how can I best educate them?
No, it's a good and important question, and language is important, and it's very hard to scale agile or lean for that sake. But I mean, using that language of Scrum and continuous delivery and Slack or Sprint. I mean, they might think that Slack is about laziness, right? I mean, so you need a language that these guys can understand. Beyond Budgeting has that language. They might disagree, but they understand what we are talking about. And again, I mean, you will learn something from reading my books and others, but also getting them to read these books will greatly help. And also, then before you attack or address the executives, I mean, get in touch with your finance organization to see if you can find some common ground. And again, you educate them about lean and agile, and they help you better understand beyond budgeting. And then maybe you can take this together to the executives. Yeah. But then also these executives, I mean, they very often they think they are running processes which are working very well. They don't have the real picture of what the situation out there. So doing surveys is something we sometimes recommend to get on the table. I mean, how dysfunctional this process is. It's very often shocking news for executives. So they will certainly go through a phase of denial before they start to address it. So that would be kind of two of my tips here.
Great, thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you, Jeremy. Folks, is anyone else? We got at least, 2 more questions to squeeze in. Raise your hand or shoot at will.
Hey, I posted a question in the chat, but I can talk about it. And I think it resonates when you said state of denial, meaning that you have a map, and the basis of it is that people evaluate themselves where they are on the map. And if they say everything is good, look, we are on the right-hand side, even though it's not the case, you can tell them, okay, so you don't need me, you're good already, goodbye. And nonetheless, they need you or they need to change. So how to help them move away from this state of denial or which is linked to fear, I believe.
Absolutely, the fear of losing control, for instance. So no, it's a good question. And when we started out, then this was more difficult than what is the case today, because 2 things have happened. First of all, if you look at that logo list of companies, so many companies, big companies, are embarking on this journey, that there is a certain peer pressure building up. Are you from Germany, by the way?
No, I'm from France.
Okay, sorry. But in Germany, what is happening is, by the way, in France, Pernod Ricard have embarked on a beyond budgeting journey, just as you know. But in Germany, and not just in Germany, there is a cluster of petrochemical, pharmaceutical companies building up. So there's peer pressure. You can see more and more starting now because there is a peer pressure. And Roche, who has a very good name, they were an early mover, so everybody's looking at Roche. So that is kind of, so today you can point to other companies that are doing this. And sometimes if competitors are among these companies, then that sometimes creates a reaction. The other thing that has happened, and this is just over the 2 last years, almost all the big consulting firms have become seriously interested in beyond budgeting because their clients are asking for it. So almost everybody has been in touch with us. They want to work with us because, again, most of them have been so honest, we don't have the competence. We've had long discussions. Shall we say yes or no? Because we are not naive. These guys have their agenda. We come from different places. But we have actually concluded on a yes. We would rather help these, and especially their clients, succeed than to sit on the outside, watch them fail. And what has happened now is that 2 of these firms have made surveys among their clients and others about beyond budgeting with very positive results for beyond budgeting. Boston Consulting Group, BCG, they asked clients and others, what kind of benefits are you seeing from beyond budgeting? And there's a long list of very positive effects coming from CEOs, CFOs, finance functions, and so on. The other company that has done a survey is Bain & Company. They had a slightly different angle. They have defined a group of what they call leading companies in financial planning. And then they looked at to what extent are these leading companies applying the beyond budgeting principles compared to the rest. And again, very striking results, a clear connection between being defined as leading and thinking and applying beyond budgeting. Right? So this is more than correlation, this is causation. And I'm mentioning this because some executives, what they need to hear is that the big ones like BCG, like Bain and others are interested. I've written 2 articles together with BCG, which you can Google and show them. Because again, we must admit that these, many executives listen more to these guys still than they do to us. So a few tips on what you can do.
Okay, thank you. So you were answering, I would say, the first level of the question, which is convincing the company that they need to change something. Let's assume that this is done. Then they must draw the map for themselves. And then it is the VP, the directors, the seniors, something that have to self-evaluate and say, yeah, after all, I'm very much in command and control. And I don't want to change. So I'm going to say, no, I'm good. I'm not command and control. And even though the top of the company would like to change, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, of course, if there's a CEO who think like that and act like that, of course you have a challenge. What we are seeing is that, these CEOs are still kind of open for external impulses, and there's so much happening today around beyond budgeting that it might one day help them change their mind. But still, I would be careful with criticizing these guys for what they have done, right? Because that's kind of, that can be counterproductive, but help them to understand that things have changed. What worked yesterday doesn't work that well today because things have changed. That is not criticism. That is kind of helping them understand that they need to do something.
Thank you, Bjarte. Bjarte, thank you very much. We actually at the time, I know there was one more question from Mohammed. Mohammed, can you make it very fast?
Sure. I think I've already posted the question there. I had additional question, but love to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, what are some KPIs recommended, Bjarte, like for any organization that is trying to implement beyond budgeting? Like traditionally, I've seen headcount. Sorry.
What did you say?
KPIs.
Which kind of KPIs? Oh, dead end. Don't start at all by starting to look at the KPIs. That's yeah. You know what we have to remember. I've been working with KPIs for almost 30 years. I've been wasting too many years searching for the perfect KPI. It doesn't exist. There are a combination of KPIs that can make them better, but they will always be indicators and nothing more. And we tend to forget when we say KPIs, right? They are indicators. There is a reason they are not called KPTs, key performance truth. They are called key performance indicators. So I think we should start calling them indicators instead of KPIs, as a constant reminder that they can be useful in indicating something, but they are seldom telling the full truth. Right? You probably heard the saying, not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. I'm sorry being a bit, but I have a very strong viewpoints on KPIs because too often it's a dead end.
Thank you very much. As a matter of fact.
Sure. And one last question, follow up on that, if I may ask.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, Jin, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You had the second question.
Okay. Yeah, second question is, I saw a lot of companies, but I want to understand, especially the Fortune 500 companies or the big companies, right? The Bang and Fang, like Amazon, Facebook. What is your point of view about their budgeting? Because most people try to follow the tech space, like what you said, right? The technology space follows a lot on these companies. I am assuming the management also follows a similar thing, but just want to hear your point of view because I'm short of knowledge. I'm not worked in those companies, but want to hear from your point of view and your experience.
So I assume your question is about the fact that you find very few Silicon Valley companies on that list. And our experience is that while these companies are vanguards and amazing when it comes to technology innovation, they're often Stone Age when it comes to management innovation. I mean, the stories we've heard about how they run their companies internally, including budgeting, is simply amazing. So you're back to this schizophrenic attitude that management innovation is great and technology innovation is great and management innovation is scary. And I'm writing a bit about this in my last book. And one reason might be that, you know, these were all startups at one point in time. Then they wanted to go public and they recruited CFOs with their core competence in helping companies go public. And these CFOs are typically not that interested in management models and business agility, right? So that could be one reason. I don't know, but it's so not even Tesla have we put up on that list, even if they have some interesting features, but Mr. Musk has certain behaviors that we can't support.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree because a lot of management innovation is still lacking in these kind of companies. But again, because of being startups, they continue to operate and have their own models. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Bjarte. Nice to meet you again after the conference last year.
Thank you for the question, Mohammed. Bjarte, we are going to wrap up on this note. I do want to thank you personally very much for finding the time to come out and join us today. Once again, it's been enlightening, very informative, and by the turnout of people, I can, I see it was worth everyone's time. Everyone stayed. Now we have people dropping, so we need to wrap.
Can I also then say that, I mean, if anybody wants me in to do an inspirational talks for your management teams, executives, online, on site, I mean, you will see my contact details in the slides. So please reach out. This is what I'm doing all the time, and this is what I love to do: help companies getting started.
I would echo this. If you folks want to reach out and have Bjarte talk internally within your company and amplify the message, and to your senior executives, this is probably the best way to drop bombs, right? So your soldiers can get on the ground and do work. Well, on this note, thank you very much for joining, Bjarte. Thank you once again. Everyone have a great weekend and the rest of the Friday if you're still on the clock. Okay? All the best.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.